I think she was very impressive when she won the Vermeil. It was a re-entry, and she ran a bit fresh with Frankie. And when she saw daylight, she just flew, like she did in the Prix. Mares do very well in the autumn in the Arc. I won 3 times with mares, the Arc. I think she's the one to beat.
She looks like a potential champion, and your sister Cricket seems to think that she's improving literally every day.
Yeah, she says so, and she's done very well. She looks beautiful when she ran last time. Obviously, I think she'll be hard to beat. I think she'll take a lot of beating.
Let's have a word about the opposition. Only 12 horses have got beaten in an Arc and then gone and won an Arc, and one of those was one of yours, actually, Even Jika.
Yeah.
Got beaten and then won an Arc. Orfèvre, I mean, looked very impressive in the Foire.
He was very impressive, but I'm not sure he's a real 1.5-mile horse. And Orfèvre, when he has to fight, I wonder if he's a real fighter. And in the Arc, they're going to go a good gallop, and the end is going to be the last 200 yards could be his last, the real hard time for him.
It's amazing he got beat last year, doesn't he? Because he looked as though he was going to win easily at one stage.
Absolutely, and as soon as he's under pressure, he starts to hang. And so the other day was very impressive. I think he didn't beat much. I don't know. I'm not that enthusiastic about Orfèvre.
And the other Japanese runner, because it, of course, ran against Ruler of the World in the Niel. And Ruler of the World seemed to be staying on strongly, but the Japanese horse travelled better.
I think I like those 2 horses. I like the Irish horse. He was very unlucky. I think he should have won. And the Japanese horse ran a good race. It was a re-entry for him. He hadn't run for a long time. I think they both have a chance.
Would you prefer to have a horse with a turn of foot or a grinder, something that's absolutely solid in the stamina department? Well,
you have to stay to win the Arc. But still, I mean, you have to be a good horse and have a certain turn of foot. And it's always a fast-run race. The draw is going to be very important too. I think at Longchamp, if you can be inside, it's a big advantage.
You train Goldikova for the owners of Intello. Would you think Intello will stay 1.5 miles, or would you worry?
I don't know. I'm not. I think he's had a hard season. I wonder if he stays a good horse, but well, I'm not. He has a chance. He's let's say he could finish among the first 5.
If you were to get back in the saddle and bid for your 5th Arc, which is Trev the horse?
Oh yes, for me there's no doubt.
Not just sentiment?
No sentiment. I think she's way above the others.
The legendary Freddie Head there talking about some of Trev's rivals. Very lukewarm on Orfèvre, not so worried about him. That was interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, that is interesting, and I mean, the most knowledgeable family, especially when you're talking about the Arc in the whole of the world. You know.
Just while we were watching that, I'll just let you in on a secret. They were chatting amongst themselves, James and Jamie there. And James, you were asking Jamie. I'm going to ask it because I think it's a good question. What do Timeform do with a trial like Orfèvre's there? Winning the Foy for the 2nd year running, but it was at a very slow pace. I mean, visually it looks really impressive. We all go, that's fantastic, and all the bookies reps halve his price. What do you make of a run like that?
That one is quite easy. That's easy pickings compared to the Prix Foy, in which you get a heaped field and it doesn't really give a true representation of those horses. Right. But Orfèvre, in terms of ratings, that doesn't really impact anything. He did basically what he was expected to, what we all knew he did, what we all knew he was capable of. It was
what if a horse emerges from nowhere with a performance like that? Would you have a question mark over it because of a slow pace?
Definitely, yeah. Okay. Definitely. You'd have to query that because it's the substantial nature of the rating. It's not just the rating itself, it's the actual substance behind it.
But when you do have a slow pace, you could argue that it's more difficult to put lengths between yourself in the field than, for instance, Novelist in the King George, when it's almost as if, I mean, I'm not meaning to crab novelist, but you could say that because they went so hard for so long, the extended distances were going to come. The race was going to fall apart. Now, he smashed the course record. That's fantastic. But he's only done it. It's almost like on the track athletics. You know, Mo Farah can only possibly beat the 10,000 metre world record if somebody else is prepared to go hard from a very early stage.
It's interesting. It's interesting. Let's see one or two other form clues. And obviously we had Arc Trials Day. We've talked about one or two of those. We haven't shown you the Prix Niel. Let's put that right now, where Kizuna, the Japanese horse, comes out on top, but only by a short head from Ruler of the World. We've also got Flincher in this race. Don't forget Andre Fabre's Flincher in the Carlo d'Abdul was Antipost favourite in many lists prior to this run. What did you make of this, James, first of all? I mean, many people were particularly impressed, I suppose, with Ruler of the World's run.
Yeah, and Kizuna. I think it's difficult to crab Kizuna. I mean, both him, in fact, almost more so Kizuna than Ruler of the World. I don't know whether Jamie would agree with me here. Had quite a kind ride. You know, there should be improvement. He hasn't run for, and this is, you know, we're going back to the Japanese. They're almost their raison d'etre. But obviously, if you're flying a horse from one side of the world to the other side of the world, you're not really interested in winning the prep race. That's neither here nor there. You're interested in doing exactly what you want to do in the prep race, but the race you want to win is the Arc. So he's definitely got 3 weeks more of, or 4 weeks more of improvement in him between the two races.
Mind you, Ruler of the World ran a similar kind of race, flying at the death, and again, you would expect more, would you?
Yeah, definitely. That surprised me, and probably as a time form, given the downbeat view we had of the 3-year-olds in general, the middle distance 3-year-olds at least. It was the way Kizuna travelled and the way Ruler of the World finished. That was the two impressive parts of both the respective horses.
Time-wise, how did that race stack up? Because I thought for both of those horses it looks a good trial, but what did the numbers tell you?
The numbers told us that it not so poor in time terms as Orfevre, but not so good as Trev. Okay. But likewise, you have to mark those two up because they were going away at the finish, because the race, we're back to that, wasn't conducive to an explosive performance. Were you there at the Arc in 2006, James, when Deep Impact
I wasn't.
took over?
I was blubbing somewhere. Unbelievable, you know. I just couldn't imagine that this horse could possibly get beat, especially in what I saw as a weak Arc that year. I mean, Rail Link is hardly seen as one of the great champions of the last 20 years. And
just the reason I ask is because he is the sire of Kizuna, isn't he? Is he making big waves over there, Deep Impact?
Yes, he is, and he does look like he's going to be a brilliant stallion. However, because of his reputation, the quality of the mares that have gone to him has been off the scale. So whether he's going to be quite as good a stallion as he was racehorse is still, because he's had the material he's got. You know, if you send world-class mares to a good stallion, you're still going to get very, very good horses. But yeah, just made a massive impact.
Just on Ruler of the World, Enzo gave us that stat of Derby winners have gone and followed up in the Arc de Triomphe in the same season. Where do you stand currently on the 3-year-old form? Because as you say, we've been pretty downbeat, haven't we, about the British Classic form this season. Then he goes and flops in Ireland, but then he comes out and does this in France, and you'd expect more to come. So I'm scratching my head. I don't quite know where to put him now.
Because it's the Arc, it's easy for us to wax lyrical about all the competitors. They have all got something to recommend them. They're all positives in some way. We have to be realistic about it, and that for me is the least impressive trial, both the way it developed and the horses involved. It was only 3-year-olds. At least Trev has done it against the older horses such as Wild Coco. That is a 3-year-old collection. We know from the St Leger, from the Irish Derby, from the other 3-year-old races, that generally speaking they are much of a muchness. There's no standout. That race, that trial, much of a muchness again, wasn't it? They were all on top of each other in the finish. Kizuna had to really go and prove that a different source of 3-year-old form was much better than what we've seen over here. He didn't do that, although, as James said, the trainer was pretty adamant that he was only 85-ish% fit that day.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, another horse we must mention, one that's one of our emailers mentioned, a Galileo colt who could be a real handful, is Intello, who's taken a slightly strange route towards the Arc this year. We've been following his progress here on ATR. This is him running in the Jacques Le Marois over a mile, of course, and this route has surprised one or two people, James, because we always felt that maybe the Arc was the target, but they apparently looked as though they wanted to come back and try and win Group 1 over a mile first.
It surprised me. I mean, I was absolutely astonished to win the French Derby, and your next start is in a Group 3 over a mile. I mean, that's unheard of. I couldn't. If it hadn't have been Andre Fabre, I would have seriously considered the fact that he'd lost his marbles, whoever was training in Tello. But I think there's a couple of things in here. I think the Wertheimer family are particularly keen on the Arc, and won it with Solemnia last year. So that may have come into his thinking, and also the fact that he has such an embarrassment of riches of 3-year-old colts over the mile and a quarter-ish, bit more distance this year, and it was plain that he had from a reasonably early stage in the summer. Therefore, it made sense to maybe split them up by keeping one of them back to a shorter trip. I spoke to Andre Fabre a few days ago and talking to him about the pedigree of Intello. And you got some, I mean, all right, if you look far enough back in any horse's pedigree, you can find horses that are speedy when the horse ends up being all about stamina. But he's got horses like Occupant d'East, El Nadim, proper, really fast sprinters. And I think mile and a half could easily be his Wool Solution.
It's interesting. It has been an interesting campaign, hasn't it? But back to 10 furlongs last time. An easy target for him, but he did win well over 10 last time. What do you make of Intello? Is he a proper middle distance horse or not?
I don't think so. I think I'm in James's camp of being puzzled by the campaigning. I like your explanations there about the family influence of they like to have representation at the Arc. But there's also the other thing of, were you slightly surprised, as I was, that he came out and said, Intello is my best chance of the Arc, I think he's planning to run 4. So we know about Intello, we know he hasn't got outstanding claims in an Arc, and it might just mean that he's just, if you haven't got a proper bullet to fire, you have to throw a few darts at the bullseye to try and get it that way. So I'm a bit underwhelmed by Intello. I think the Champion Stakes was made for him. I think that the opposition won't be as hot as it is in the Arc. 10 furlongs, obviously, compared to 12 furlongs. So Intello for the Arc, not for me.
But maybe for the Champion Stakes. We'll come back to the Champion Stakes, but let's wrap up the Arc. Here's Enzo.
Thank you, Sean. Just to wrap up the emails and tweets about the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe, Tommy Cully was saying, hi guys, remembering the massive gamble on Deep Impact a few years ago, is the Japanese horse Orfèvre not a back to lay possibly in this year's Arc? Interesting way of perhaps trading on the race, suggesting that Orfèvre might trade at a short price and running. Well, last year, of course, Tommy, he did trade at the minimum price, 1.01 on the exchanges. Orfèvre traded when he burst to the front 12 months ago. So it's possibly another way of perhaps playing Orfèvre in the Arc. Brian was also asking about the record of horses trained in Britain in the Arc. Well, of course, only Workforce in recent years, Brian, has won it. So Michael Stout's Workforce, of course, won it in 2010. Quite a few have failed. We've had lots of winners trained in Ireland, the likes of See the Stars and Dylan Thomas. Lots of French trained winners, of course, Solemnia, Zarkovar in recent years, and of course the German influence with Daydream a couple of years ago as well. So it's a fair point you make. Who's the best chance of a British winner this year? Some people say Al Kazim, some people might say the Fugue. I had a few people actually on Twitter saying, what about the Fugue? I mean, she's looked the real deal this season. Is good ground, though, imperative to her chances? Quite possibly, if conditions went against her, that would be a worry. But, yeah, thank you. I've got through most of the emails and the tweets now, I think, about the Arc. I've got plenty more about the other big races, the other legs of the Slam, but I'll put those to one side for now.
All 4 legs of our autumn ATR Grand Slam, of course, Champions Day still to come, Melbourne Cup and Breeders' Cup as well. But a final word on the Arc de Triomphe. I'm going to throw it quickly back to Enzo because I'm not sure we pinned him down to a selection. I know what came out of the machine. Are you going with the machine, Enzo?
I've got to go with what the machine says, Sean. Being in Stats Corner, the computer says Trev. So I've got to go with it. All this software costs so much money, so I've got to go with what it comes out with. And Trev fits the bill. As long as she gets a low draw, I would put in as a little bracket there as well, because she fits in the 3-year-old bracket. That 3-year-old stat, 15 of the last 19 winners have been of the classic generation. Fillies with that good recent record in the race as well. I'll go along with the stats. I'll go along with the machine. I'll go with Trev and Frankie.
Trev and Frankie Dettori then for Enzo. Time forms Jamie Lynch. Where are we going?
Must just mention the Fugue, because that is a horse who I've actually...
We haven't touched on the Fugue really, or on Al Kazim, so just give me a quick line on both if you can.
I've backed the Fugue because she's 20 to 1, and as we saw the time form ratings at the top, that is wholly misrepresentative of her chance on form. She's right up there with the mare's allowance, and she's looked better than ever the last twice. The reason she's 20 to 1 is because there's that doubtful factor of whether she'll go, but I'm willing to take the chance because if the ground isn't too bad and if John Gosden says, let's roll the dice, as John Gosden likes to say, then she'd be 7 or 8 to 1 on the day. But in terms of time form, solid form, Murray's time, who's the best horse so far? Novelist.
Interesting. Novelist, 6.5 to 1 shot, the German horse. What about you, James?
I'm very conflicted between the top two.
We should say on Price, when Price-wise is in the Racing Post, it says already advised, and you've already advised Orfev, so you've got that one in the town. I'm going to give you that at about 8 to 1. So
Thank you. That's very. I'm very. I wish I had you round more often. You're more generous than my other bookies.
I'm not going to backdate your bets. It doesn't work that way. But go on.
I'm very conflicted between Orfev and Trev as to which I think. I think there's negatives on both of them. I think they're both outstanding champions. Maybe Trevor's more to prove than Orfev, but Orfev is quirkier. I just think on a price perspective, I would therefore now just side with Trev. Okay. But Novelist. I mean, that would be a great result for international racing too. So I'd be happy with all of those.
We can't help but be a bit vague in terms of what we fancy, because the truth of it is, any one of 6 horses in this field would be favourite and the leading contender in a normal year for the Arc. It's an exceptional race, it really is. Yeah,
it's a terrific renewal. And we don't know what the ground is, which is another reason why I'm with you for Novelist, because I kind of don't mind what the ground is for Novelist. If it's a bit soft, he'll be fine. If it's a bit quick, he'll be fine. I like the German horse too.